Tobago television, we are being allowed to make another news bulletin. The Imam Abu Bakr wants you to know that the police headquarters in downtown Port-of-Spain has been gutted by fire. They are still in control of TTT. The staffers here are unharmed. To repeat, the Imam Abu Bakr wants you to know that the police headquarters in downtown Port-of-Spain has been gutted by fire. They are still in control of TTT. The staffers here are unharmed.
At 6 p.m. this afternoon, the government of Trinidad and Tobago was overthrown. The Prime Minister and members of the cabinet are under arrest. We are asking everybody to remain calm.
Good evening and welcome to a pre-recorded version of News Source. So while you're seeing this, I'm not actually here. This was recorded earlier today and I hope you enjoy the content.
For what the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago have to be going through under the new governance, I wonder if it is fair, because I trying to understand something and I trying to break it down and simplify this as simple as possible. Ain't no way that we under the UNC government and yet still we still waiting for moves to make. You understand? Ain't no way we under the UNC government who gave a manifesto that was one of the best manifesto to chain up people's head so people could run to get all their votes. Ain't no way. Ain't no way we under the UNC government where they had almost all the black citizens of Trinidad and Tobago on a bandwagon bawling, yellow is the code. Everybody supporting the UNC and they wanted the PNM government out. Ain't no way. Ain't no way that we having the crime rate not walking up, not running up, but sprinting up. Ain't no way these things happening under the UNC. This new governance. It could never be. Because just a couple months when everybody was on a bandwagon, yellow is the code, Pamela is the answer, she will solve the problems. And yet still, innocent people like you and I walk in the streets of Trinidad and Tobago and we so. We can't walk in the night, we can't come out early in the morning to exercise. You understand? We can't do nothing.
Government accountable, so that's what I'm going to attempt to do. And this is going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but it needs to be said. For a party that has had in its manifesto for quite some time that one of the things you'll want to work on is creating a wider job market and getting jobs for younger people, you all are not doing a very good job. Because the public healthcare sector hasn't hired any junior doctors since April of this year. Because when government shifted over, the RHA's boards had to be disbanded and they have to get new people affiliated with them in order to hire. We are going into August and that has not happened. So what that is telling us is that you are not prioritizing the healthcare sector. And when I say the healthcare sector, I mean the public healthcare sector, which is crazy to me because the majority of persons in Trinidad and Tobago cannot afford private healthcare. So that's where the public healthcare sector comes in. So what you have is a sector that is always understaffed but yet never has jobs. And that has never made sense to me. Maybe I just don't understand, but that has never made sense to me. So you have teams that require 4 or 5 house officers operating on 2, and in some cases even 1. And in addition to burning out your current house officers, because they won't have time to rest, they won't have days off, they'll have to take all the call shifts. In addition to that, you are also directly impacting the quality of patients' healthcare. Just because people cannot afford private healthcare does not mean they are any less important. Tired house officers kill people. Tired house officers make mistakes. And you have so many people willing to work and we are just not being called and not being hired. Why? Because RHAs don't have boards. At this point, I don't know if you'll need to put names in a hat and pick, but something needs to be done. Because this is looking very bad. The first thing you all did when you all came into power is you all halted hiring in the public healthcare system, and that does not look good. It tells us you don't prioritize healthcare, and it tells the people of this country you are okay with healthcare being impacted on a quality level because you can't get your stuff in order in time. Please do not make promises to the public that you can't keep. Please do not overpromise and then underdeliver. It makes no sense.
Always not me say it, it's them say it. Because when I say it, the first thing is, well, she's a PNM, and it had to be a PNM message and PNM propaganda. So, them say it. I didn't say it. 3 months in to the governance of the United National Congress. 3 months in, and clearly there is a lot of disappointment. Plenty people vexed, frustrated, and quiet. All of the people who was busy telling me, Kamla this, Kamla that, Kamla going to do A, B, C, D, E, X, Y, Z, 1 to 10, full 100, suddenly very quiet. Nothing to say, nothing to report. They're not even commenting, they ain't liking, they're not even pushing back. And they can't push back because, of course, there is so much evidence in the public domain that this government has oversold itself. This government is not anywhere ready to run a country. Probably not even to run a parlor. So good evening and hello to everyone who is looking on at the program. I can't call it a live because it's not live this evening. It is pre-recorded. I had to pre-record because I was not in a position to be around to do it at the time that I would normally do it. And I didn't want to push this live off any further because there's an important debate on Monday. And I want to make sure that I cover a bunch of things in this live that I think are going to be pertinent to the debate on Monday. But before we get into those things, because those things would be centered around the state of emergency, let's get into some other things that would have happened already just in this last week here. Because you know how things is go. Busy in this place all the time. So, last evening, the PNM would have announced its 3 deputy political leaders. And based on that image there, you will see that Coleman Burt, Jennifer Baptiste Primus, and Sanjeev Budu have been named as DPLs. 2 of the selections I understand, 1 selection I don't quite understand. But that's PNM business. I am not inside the PNM. So I will let the General Council people deal up with those specific things. When it gets to the point where PNM business is directly impacting on public governance, then I will have things to say. So, the new deputy political leaders of the People's National Movement. Justice Ricky Rahim this week, somewhere around Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, gave me Christmas in July because he delivered a landmark ruling where Sport TT was found, the board of Sport TT was found to be in breach over the $34 million contract that would have been given to, I think EB was the name of the company that got $34 million to provide some sort of education program under LifeSport that never happened. So the person just get hand $34 million, never had to do anything, never fulfilled its responsibilities, and, well, the company or the person. And basically didn't have to give back the state the money because the state never made an effort to fulfill its ends of a contractual arrangement. So there were no criteria for the company to meet, and so the company just got paid $34 million to do nothing. So this week, after a long investigation and civil matter, Justice Ricky Rahim found that the Sport TT board, made up of John Mollenthal and Sebastian Paddington and a couple other persons, those are the 2 names I remember, was in breach over that $34 million deal. Now you would remember that the line minister during that time, responsible for sport and so therefore responsible for LifeSport, was Anil Roberts. Since the ruling, we can't get doubles on coffee. Right? My boy, early morning conversation with his followers. We can't get no doubles on coffee since this ruling. As a matter of fact, there have been people asking me whether Anil has left the country, because they haven't seen him, they haven't heard him. He is laying very low. My question, though, is not whether Anil Roberts is in the country or not. My question is, why does he still have a job? Why is he still a senator? Why is he still a minister in a ministry? Because that's not no joke ruling that Ricky Rahim put down there. If you're saying that the board was found to be in breach and the board mustn't function as a rubber stamp, who was the board functioning as a rubber stamp for? Who else would have had oversight and seen and known and been aware of what was taking place under the board? Because we can't continue to pretend that the line minister doesn't know or cannot know. And worse than that the line minister somehow gets to use the board as protection for decisions that the line minister would be aware of. Because no board can approve $34 million. No board. If a board is putting forward a proposal for $34 million to be paid to one contractor, and in the case of LifeSport, we know that it was close to $500 million that was poured into the program, right? Somewhere around $400 to $500 million. So we're very clear that for something like that to happen, Cabinet would have to have approved the size of money, right? The funding. That's the point that I'm making here. So if the cabinet then had to approve $34 million being given to this contractor, it means that the line minister had to take it before the cabinet. So the line minister would have gotten this particular proposal, which would have been, I guess, in the form of a cabinet minute to go before the cabinet with. So Anil knew. Did he not raise any questions? And if Anil knew and he went before the cabinet and he got approval, that means the rest of the cabinet then knew as well. Nobody raised any questions. So this ruling raises questions for what boards can do, get away with, and then pretend that they know nothing about. So you can't just wash your hands anymore. A precedent has been set in law. And so I thank Justice Ricky Rahim. Thank you. Thanks, sir. Good job. Frank C. Prasad might be a little bit green with envy right now. Good job, Justice Rahim. And again, why does Anil still have a job? Why is he still collecting salary that the taxpayers foot in? Especially in light of this particular attack on the Treasury back in around 2014, thereabouts. Why does he still have a job? And I was kind of glad to see this story occur this week because it's so timely. It feeds in so well with the other issues that we're going to be culminating the program with. Right. So, moving along. Good news. Whitehall open. Because I'm seeing Junior Prime Minister Darrell Alahar, or Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Darrell Alahar, was at Whitehall this week, prepping for a long, hard day of work under rainy conditions. Useful to know, or useful to point out, it doesn't rain inside Whitehall, Darrell, because the caption says, rain does only stop cricket, right? Rain doesn't stop work. And I would imagine that rain was not going to be stopping work in Whitehall. I've been inside Whitehall. Nice digs, very comfortable furniture. The roof is a very expensive roof. It's well done. The preservation, maintenance, and upgrades to Whitehall were handled very well by the contracting firm that did it. So I was certainly not laboring under the impression that Whitehall was not functional. I'm pretty clear that the other minister in the office of the Prime Minister, the other minister who often behaves as if it too is also the Prime Minister, Barry Padarak, I think he was making much ado about nothing, because up to now, nobody can tell me who are the contractors that fixed Whitehall and the Diplomatic Centre in short order to make them both working buildings all over again. So I don't think anything was wrong with the buildings. I think that it was a big distraction. They didn't want anybody questioning why Kamala Prasad Bissessa cannot show up for work. And you will notice that she is still not showing up for work. We have a country where in 3 months, the Prime Minister shows up for work one afternoon a week. Everybody else I know has to do a 8 to 4, a 9 to 5, a 7 to 3. Even if all you're doing is walking into the office and being present, you have to show up for 8 hours a week, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Kamala Prasad Bissessa shows up one afternoon a week. One afternoon a week. And then plays videos of herself at revival meetings and events to establish that she around, she doing things. Try harder than that, Mowsie. Especially since your support base, your membership, spends a lot of time telling other people about who lazy and who don't work and who don't know how to run things. And then here you are, one afternoon a week, giving the impression that you somehow can run an entire country one afternoon a week. No wonder nothing is going on. No wonder the economy is in free fall. No wonder we can't hear anything about the energy sector. No wonder every month end I am hearing from a range of public servants the salary is reach in the bank on time. But good news, the office of the Prime Minister is open and functional, and at least one minister in the office of the Prime Minister is showing up to use the facility. Ay, ay, ay. More good news. A month ago, I told you all that Gary Hunt was going to be the new chairman of Angostura. It appears as if mainstream media didn't believe me, as if I'm in the habit of bringing fake news to all you. I don't do the fake news. I leave that for your other lead investigative journalists. I will come to you only with the most resilient of information. So a month ago, we announced this, and this morning, CCN Express announced this, that Gary Hunt is tipped to be the new chairman of Angostura. Congratulations to Mr. Hunt and the other members of his board. Right, and we're still talking about things that happen when UNC wins. Within the first 5 or 6 days of this government having come into power, so not from April 29th, let's look at from when the cabinet would have been sworn in, right? So from when the Attorney General, at the very least, was sworn in. There was a post that was made back then. I have to go back and find it because I remember making screenshots and sharing it. But one of the news pages, one of those new media pages that just showed up overnight, that is clearly aligned with the sitting government, had put up a post. And it was a post of a video of the Chief Justice and David West being on a flight back in 2019. Now, based on the cabin layout When I looked at it, I thought this looks like a flight to the UK. And it's not weird or untoward for our government officials to be going off to attend conferences, especially of a judicial or criminal or legal nature. So that video was put up by this anonymous web page or Facebook news page. But it is a Facebook news page that does a lot of things that are clearly pro-government. And the implications behind the post then was that there was something nefarious or shady about Mr. West and Chief Justice Archie being on the same flight together, heading off to, I'm assuming, the United Kingdom. And I'm assuming that based on the layout of the plane, right? It felt like it was one of those UK bound flights, or appeared. It looked that way to me. So I remember taking note of that and putting it up and saying, we need to keep an eye on this, because it wouldn't surprise me if this government decides it's going to go after the Chief Justice and David West. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks ago, they announced this arrangement to create a new position called Lord Chancellor or Judicial Chancellor or something like that, which is their way of attempting to interfere with the judiciary. And now, this week, comes this. Last night at around 9 p.m., somewhere between 9 and 10 p.m., this page, Crime Wave TT News and Media, put up this story. You'll see it has 31 likes. The page has about 8,400 people liking it. I'm not sure how many people follow the page, but they put up a story about some anonymous group, and it says, public calls for immediate dismissal of PCA head David West. And then the story goes into saying that a small group of concerned citizens of Trinidad and Tobago calling for David West to either resign or be fired as head of the PCA. Why? You will not believe why. Because David West is doing his job. That's why they want him fired. So when you see logic like that, you know immediately the only group of people that does want to fire people for doing their job is people who are affiliated with United National Congress. So here is this anonymous Facebook news page, Crime Wave TT. Prior to April the 28th, Crime Wave TT would be posting only crime stories. That's what I used to see. If there were murders, any kind of crime, if they had CCTV footage of things, that's what they would be posting. Suddenly, in the aftermath of April 28th, these pages have suddenly started covering current affairs. They are all now suddenly current affairs pages. So they're posting government news, government stories, contemporary political stories from Trinidad and Tobago. And then last night, that page put up this story about David West, about this group, this anonymous, nebulous, vague, ambiguous group that has no name. We have no idea how many persons are in the group, but they're calling for David West to step down. You will remember that PCA Director West has a matter before the courts where he, is he a witness? It's to do with witness tampering. And I know that Gary Griffith, David West, and Ram Logan, all three of them are tied into this legal matter because it is witness tampering that got Anand Ram Logan fired as Attorney General back at the start of 2015. Because if you remember, this guy, the one with the tweezed eyebrows, God, Nicholas, oh God, Garvin Nicholas, Lord, old age in my tail, no. Garvin Nicholas got a little Kobo sweat as Attorney General back in 2015. And that was when Anand Ram Logan, who is currently on the Stand Your Ground circuit now, promoting the legislation, Anand Ram Logan was fired as Attorney General because he was charged with witness tampering. So there is this matter before the courts that Anand Ram Logan has to answer to for witness tampering or interfering in a case. And the main witness, if I'm not mistaken, is Gary Griffith. He was fired then too. He was then the former Minister of National Security. Well, sorry, he was then the Minister of National Security. So he got fired, Anand got fired, Garvin got appointed. I think Brigadier Carl Afonso, Nairi Afonso's dad, became the Minister of National Security then. There were a whole bunch of persons who were fired out and reshuffled around then because Kamala had to come and do a press conference and announce the stance that she was taking on things. And that's when Gary got fired, Anand got fired, and this whole business of witness tampering that involves David West occurred. So, given the punitive and retributive tenor of this government's term in office thus far, it wouldn't surprise me that this news site, this social media news page that is often promoting a lot of pro-government information now, is being used to plant the idea in people's head that David West should be fired because he has criticized the police for the number of extrajudicial killings that have happened since the state of emergency occurred. It's not the first time that David West has spoken out on extrajudicial killings. As a matter of fact, if you'll remember when the Andrea Barrett incident occurred and the 2 witnesses to the murder died, he spoke out, he launched an investigation. When the 3 men in Mova were gunned down, the PCA investigated that. There have been numerous extrajudicial killings that the PCA has investigated, sent files to the DPP, made recommendations for the charges that should be laid to the DPP. The PCA is a police watchdog group. That's the whole point of the PCA, to have oversight of the TTPS so that if they are abusing their power, they can be disciplined and held in check. So how a group of citizens could have a problem with David doing his job? In any case, Director West responded basically to say, hey, I'm doing my work. Rest yourself. So the statement is there. Hopefully the statement will be published in the newspaper. I hope the Guardian publish it the same way they publish that foolish story, right? Because Crime Wave TT had it last night. Then the Guardian comes this morning with the exact same story. And this is what you need to understand about this. Right? Let me take my time and break this down properly. Crime Wave TT is an anonymous social media news page. Right? Anonymous social media news page. Guardian, CNC 3, and Guardian Media Limited took a story, an anonymous story, because it doesn't say who wrote the story. It doesn't name the group, nothing like that. It takes an anonymously written story from an anonymous Facebook news page and republishes it this morning and makes it legitimate mainstream news. The same Guardian does run a thief story from me, wouldn't even attribute me a source, wouldn't even name me a source, but it will go and take a nameless story from the night before that doesn't even say who are the people that have a problem with David West doing his job, and they publish it as a mainstream news story. I hope you all are paying attention to what mainstream media is doing in this country. I hope you all are paying attention to the dangerous precedents that are being set. Because you have a nameless, faceless, unaccounted for page putting up a story that names and identifies nobody, and the Guardian takes that several hours later and runs with it as a major headline story. Right? Good. So, moving along. Oh, I think this is one of the last news things I want to talk about. Last major news things I want to talk about. So this happened. Emancipation Village was open. And what I want to pay attention to is not the people who are in African garb. Rather, it's my boy in the suit here. Y'all seeing that guy in the suit? That guy in the suit now sits in our Senate. That guy in the suit is currently a minister in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. That guy in the suit who is there at the opening of the Emancipation Village, not sure why he is there, because let me embiggen the picture again. The Minister of Culture and Community Development and the Parliamentary Secretary are there in the picture, right? Because the minister is there. She has on the turquoise head wrap and the turquoise and brown dress. Next to her is her Parliamentary Secretary. He is wearing the mustard yellow and other color. It looks like terracotta brown top, right? So he is there. I think he's the MP for Naparima and also the Parliamentary Secretary. So he is there. She is there. Why is Philip there? In what capacity? In what role? He representing the African community. The African community from where? Because why the Minister of Housing? If you're going to have a minister from that line ministry, why is the line minister not there? Actually, let me take this back. Why would you need anybody from the Ministry of Housing there? Why is Philip there? And why is Philip there in this position? Because the lady next to Minister Benjamin is from the Emancipation Support Committee. Then this guy, right after Philip, is Kafra Cambon, like Kafra Cambon Jr., right? So the son of one of the elders in the Emancipation Support Committee. What Philip doing there? And this is the same Philip who has said things like this. Let me read it for you. 300 murders so far this year, 12 less than last year. Would be even less if Dr. Rowley asked his party's supporters to stop killing each other. Now, I have screenshot after screenshot after screenshot of this guy saying all kinds of things about the African descended community. So I want to know, why was Philip there? Is he there to insult members of the African descended community? Is it that the Emancipation Support Committee is unaware that Philip has repeatedly insulted the African descended community in Trinidad and Tobago? Is it that this sitting government is so hell-bent on some weird revenge fantasy that the best choice it could make was to send Philip to represent the government at the opening of the Emancipation Village this year? Yeah? Okay. Y'all making some wild choices, boy. Wild choices. Play stupid games. Win stupid prizes. Right. Okay, so I want to move on now. And we get into the meat of the matter here. The Golden Ann. All of you who remember Sesame Street, classic Sesame Street, would know the Golden Ann. You take the Golden Ann, you put it in the tan van, you take it to Fran, who will take it to Dan. And that whole Golden Ann skit with Rusty in, Chicago of 1930s, because that's the setting for those skits, pointed to these weird conspiracies, right? Organized crime conspiracies. And organized crime conspiracies is where Trinidad and Tobago finds itself today, July 27th, 35 years after the coup, the 1990 coup, and one day before a debate to determine whether or not we are going to extend a state of emergency. So here goes. One of the first disturbing things to me about this whole state of emergency is that on the morning that the state of emergency was called, it was called by the Commissioner of Police. There was no announcement by the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. As a matter of fact, to date, the proclamation wasn't signed by the President. It just bore the President's stamp. It's the first time in life I knew that the President had a name stamp. I always thought the President had to sign and the seal had to go on to any documents that the President proclaimed. So we had the Commissioner of Police, Alistair Guevara, hold a press conference. Not the Prime Minister, not the President, not even the Commissioner of Police, in conjunction with, say, the Attorney General and the Minister of Homeland Security. Nothing like that. Just the Commissioner of Police. And the Commissioner of Police comes, holds a press conference, and in the midst of the press conference, there is this conversation about the patch that he has on his arm. Now, I didn't actually notice or pay attention to the patch. And when it was raised in the press conference, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it or attach a lot of significance to it. It is only afterwards, in the aftermath of newspaper headlines and stuff, I thought, let me go and see what this patch furor is about. And then when I found out who the Punisher was and what the patch on his arm meant, I had to laugh and shake my head. Alistair Guevara is easily the third, and maybe there's more than three of them, right? But he is easily the third Commissioner of Police in this country that thinks he is a film and TV character. How do you, as a whole human being, right? A whole person, a real person, if you pinch yourself, if Guevara pinch himself, he's a real person. How do you, as a real person, stand up in front of media and the rest of your colleagues, play acting like you are a cartoon character, comic book character? And what is the fascination that our commissioners of police have with seeing themselves as TV characters, as action figures, as morally grey people who operate outside of the law? Because all of the characters that they have likened themselves to, whether it is Kojak, because we had a commissioner of police here who thought he was Kojak. When he caught criminals, he would stand up and pose over them, foot on their chest with his gun, and call reporters to take pictures of him. You all remember him, because he ended up in his Scott drug report. Randolph Burrows. We have had other commissioner of police, another commissioner of police fashion himself after Chuck Norris / John Wick. John Wick is an assassin. Chuck Norris was a morally grey ranger who did things that danced on the lines of legality. The Punisher is not a police officer. He's not a police commissioner. The Punisher is some next cartoon character, comic book character, who operates outside of the law. You're a commissioner of police. Why are you fashioning yourself after a comic book character one and a comic book character who operates outside of the law? What kind of message you sending to everybody else around you? And what does it also tell me? That you see yourself as a comic book character, not a real person, but a comic book character. Listen, me not to say again now. I really don't know what to say again. So, we found out this week, just like we found out a couple of years ago, that the prison service have big screen TV. This is not a new story. So when Wayne Sturge made this announcement, and made the announcement in such a way as for it to seem like it was big news, new news, and had media distracted, and of course, once media distracted, they're going to distract the rest of us, right? So it gets put up as this big story, flat screen, 65-inch flat screen TV behind bars.
Of the Prison Officers Association to address an issue with the 65-inch TV that was allegedly found trafficked to a cell at Building 13 at the maximum security prison. I would like to let the public know that the Prison Service Act was amended by Act 25 of 2019, where the definition of prohibited articles was removed and substituted with the following definition. Prohibited article includes dangerous drugs, explosive firearms, ammunition, artillery, weapons, mobile telephones, cameras, song recording devices, electronic devices, information technology equipment, alcohol, tobacco, money, clothing, food, drink, letters, books, tools, or any article likely to be prejudicial to the safety, security, good order, and discipline of prisons. B, any article, the introduction or removal of which into or out of a prison or any part thereof is prohibited by the prison rules, or, importantly, C, any article not expressly authorized to be brought into a prison by the Commissioner of Prisons. I would like to repeat that section. C, any article not expressly authorized to be brought into a prison by the Commissioner of Prisons.
So, a lot of people didn't seem to be aware that electronic items can be approved by the Commissioner of Prisons to be brought into the prison. I'm pretty certain that Wayne Sturge knew that electronic items could be approved by the Commissioner of Prison to be brought into the prisons. So, if he wasn't, my question would have to be, how, as a former criminal attorney, well, former practicing criminal attorney, and now current Minister of Defense, were you unaware of that, sir? How? How you didn't know? Or, my next question would be, was it a distraction? Was this whole business of a flat screen TV in jail a distraction? Because after talking about it being in prison, you then alluded to it being in a prisoner cell. Was the prisoner a client of yours? That's a question I have. And if the prisoner was a client of yours, or when you observed that there was a flat screen TV in a prisoner cell, did you raise the issue with the officials at that point in time? Did you say, hey, I saw a TV in a prisoner cell? Because I mean, 65 inches of TV is plenty TV to have in a cell. So was it raised as an issue? And for my edification, because I mean, I think I understand tech to some extent. How would the prisoner be using the flat screen TV to communicate with people? Because then that would mean if it's a smart flat screen TV, that smart flat screen TV in the prisoner's cell has internet. So where's it getting the internet from? Is this prison internet? Or is it that they also have a phone whose SIM card is functioning as a hotspot? Because then it's not the TV that they communicating with their friends and colleagues with. It would be the data from the phone. So this comes right back to technology devices and gadgets, phones with Wi-Fi access or data access being available to prisoners. And I'm going to get into that. But I feel that this whole flat screen thing was meant to be a nice fat distraction from the fact that this state of emergency is a hot mess. And it is a hot mess because the reasons being given for the state of emergency make no sense. So let me go back to Comic Strip Boy for 2 seconds. Comic Strip Boy, or our Marvel hero, so let me call him that, right? Guevara the Marvel hero. He would have announced the state of emergency. And when he announced the state of emergency, he talked about prisoners being at the root cause, right? A conspiracy that would have been intercepted within the prisons. The morning of the state of emergency, or as I understand, things to have happened. Around midnight, the police would have gotten to the prisons, right? Somewhere around midnight, they got to the prisons. And they got to the prisons to get the prisoners to transport them. If I'm understanding the chain of command and the way things happen here properly, data, information would have been intercepted by the SSA. Because it's the SSA who has the capabilities to intercept communications. Because all this talk about grabbers and jammers for phones being in the prisons, right? The grabbers and jammers, it's SSA who handles the equipment that allows for the interception of messages. So that is not equipment that lying down all over the place. So you have prisoners who have cell phones and using cell phones, SSA in a position to be able to intercept communication and listen in on conversations. Good. So let's say there were these conversations and the conversations were had, and when the conversations were had, people in positions of authority, sensitive positions of authority, heard things being exchanged. Good. You get to the prison, you move the prisoners, and you have valid reasons for wanting to move the prisoners. You then move the prisoners, some to Tetron, some to Stobles, as per the story that was in the papers. I've heard different things. I've heard that it's a group of prisoners in one specific location, but media has given us 2 different locations, right? And media has also given us a different number. So media has given the impression that it's like more than 6 prisoners at one point in time. Then I'm hearing 6 prisoners and 2 different locations. From media and then from other sources, I'm hearing something different. Anyhow, regardless of the numbers and regardless of where, you have your information that you intercepted. You then go, you take the prisoners, you move them. So, this me, right? And bear in mind, I little blonde. Don't mind the dark hair and the gray hair, right? Don't mind the salt and pepper. You get a little blonde. When they intercepted their messages, it would have been people in prison talking to people who outside a prison. Yeah? So they would have intercepted messages from people who in prison and people who outside a prison. Or you move people from inside the prisons. In the last 8-9 days of state of emergency, have you all gone and caught the persons outside of the prisons that they was talking to? Or is it a situation where the way in which the state of emergency was executed, the people outside the prisons who was part of the plan get tip off in time and they have been able to disappear? That's my question. Because remember, movement of people around midnight, or people reach the prisons around midnight to be able to get the prisoners on them. The prisoners on them only actually started to be moved during the press conference the Friday morning, right? Because they had to wait for paperwork to be signed off on. That's what I was told. So paperwork had to be signed off on. They couldn't move the prisoners and put them in particular spaces until certain paperwork was signed off on. So while the press conference was taking place, that is when the prisoners were moving. Good. So you have moved the prisoners. You have called a state of emergency. I'm not yet clear if you all have caught any of the people that outside of the prisons that was part of the conspiracy that you, Mr. Guevara, have said you all found out about that was intercepted, right? Because I going on the road with all this story, I'm going with it. I deal with all here, right? There was a National Security Council meeting the Thursday morning. Sturge wasn't there. Sturge was out in the constituency. That evening, there was a post-cabinet press conference. Xander was at the press conference. All kind of question was asked of Xander at that press conference. He never not once implied that there was anything going on by way of investigations into plots, right? Possible plots or anything like that. And maybe it was sensitive information, right? Good. So up until 7, 8 o'clock the Thursday evening, the country knows nothing about what is going on here. Xander has tipped nobody off on anything. And it appears as if the government is just plodding along with its lack of a crime plan. Friday morning, 10 o'clock, state of emergency announced by the Commissioner of Police. The Commissioner of Police tells us that there is a conspiracy involving criminals, prisons officers, people outside of the prison. To date, it is July 27th, 2025. Any prison officers arrested? Only tell me, because I asked any questions. To date, July 27th, 2025. We know prisoners have been moved from the maximum security wing of the prison and taken to a secure location. We know that our rights as citizens have been suspended because of a plot, and we hear all kind of thing. Rocket launcher, Trende, Aragua, gangs, gang plot to assassinate DPP, plot to assassinate judge, plot to blow up police stations, grenades, ammunition, explosives, big headlines, big headlines. And then whole week, the TTPS jamming the prisons. This is a prisons problem. This happened inside the prisons. Conspiracy in the prisons. Any prison officer arrested yet? Or they don't need warrant? We are in a state of emergency. Everybody rights suspended. Police could run in here right now, run in my house, break down my door, detain me. No warrant, no evidence, nothing. So I am expected to believe that since last week, right? Now we say last week Thursday. Up until last week Thursday, my boy, Trini Punisher, right? Trini Marvel Hero, get information about a plot. And the plot is a big plot. It's a plot involving 30 plus prisons officers who are part of the conspiracy. It involving at least 6 prisoners within the maximum security prison, part of that Golden Grove prison. It is a plot where ammunition, explosives, grenades going to be used. Police stations along the east-west corridor going to be targeted. The DPP and a judge, and they named the judge, going to be targeted for assassination. And in all of that, 2 things haven't happened. In a country where people like Papi Show, people like exaggeration, people like hyperbole, we have seen no evidence of the grenades and ammunition to be used, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more just now. And we have seen and heard of no arrests of prisons officers. A big conspiracy, you know. A big conspiracy involving prisoners, high-risk prisoners, and not one prison officer has been held, detained, or questioned. And I am saying this with the greatest of authority because I spoke to people in the prison system. I asked, have any officers been detained? Have any officers been brought in for questioning? Have any officers been identified as having to be questioned in relation to a plot? The response is none. None. Certainly not in relation to the state of emergency. If officers have been questioned or detained for something, it had nothing to do with the state of emergency. So, none. I want you to understand this. We are 9 or 10 days into a state of emergency. Rights suspended. Big plot. As a matter of fact, the headlines this morning, big conspiracy. Not one prisons officer has been detained for questioning with respect to this plot that is all over newspaper headlines today. So, these are the headlines that have been in the papers today, right? Judge, DPP on prison hit list. War planned behind bars. The planned relocation of the gang leader, right, is a security issue. Sturge, Rajai charged with possession of a prohibited item in the prison. I think it turns out to be, what, a cell phone or something like that, so? Right. Then Sturge comes and talks about Venezuelan gang ties. So they come back with this Venezuelan angle again. Like they didn't get enough trouble in the last couple of weeks or however many weeks ago when they decided to talk foolishness about Venezuela, right? So they come back, Venezuelan gang ties. But nobody ever seems to be able to provide any evidence to the public, right? So just a sort of wild talk, no evidence. So Venezuelan gang ties. And as part of the news story there, right, with respect to the Venezuelan gang ties. Now, did I put those stories up? I may have forgotten. So let me just pull it up real quick because there is something I want to point out to you all and I forgot to pull the stories up. Okay, here goes. July 3rd, there's a story in the newspaper about the Commissioner of Police investigating an illegal quarry in Manuel, Congo, right? And it led to a whole series of actions. Why am I looking at environmental stories and how are environmental stories linked to a plot to overthrow and destabilize the country? Real simple. It's because of where the quarry is located and where quarries are located and the constituency that Wayne Sturge is MP of. Wayne Sturge is from my community. I could walk up the road and end up in Wayne Sturge house or condominium, whatever it's called, right? Because he lives not too far from me. Wayne does not live in Grandy. My understanding is that Wayne, in his bid for the seat of the Sandy Grande Togo constituency, would have gotten a wide range of support. And some of the support he would have gotten was some people who are influential in the community of Togo Sandy Grande. And some of the persons who are influential in Togo Sandy Grande have quarries, have contracts with a number of government programs and projects, and they have been in a position to be very, very, very helpful and influential with Wayne with his campaign in Togo Sandy Grande, because I'm not aware that Wayne Sturge has huge traction and support in an area like Sandy Grande, because he appears to have been based in Port of Spain and environs for quite some time as a criminal attorney. Now, we are all aware that Wayne Sturge is or was the attorney for Rajai Ali, especially in the aftermath of all of the murder allegations and accusations that would have been made of Rajai Ali. So, for Sturge to come and suddenly go very mute and mum on the relationship that he has had with Ali prior to the elections of 2025, of April 2025, is to be disingenuous. He was your client. We all know this is public information. We also know that his associates or your association with him, friendship and ties with him, or your collegial ties with him or client ties with him, has played a role in the influence that you have in the constituency that you are now the MP of, because Rajai Ali has influence in that constituency. It's not a secret. These things are things that people will talk about casually with you, right? That there is a lot of influence as a result of the community work that the Carapo Mosque has done in the eastern part of Trinidad and Tobago. The mosque has a lot of influence in the eastern part of Trinidad and Tobago. So why pretend that you don't have ties and connections to the person that you ended up talking about all week long in news stories. So this quarry story came up. And when the quarry story came up, I paused and I started to think, wait. What's going on in our part of Trinidad again? So here are a couple things. And of course, I had to be careful about how I talk about some of these couple things. The Commissioner of Police and other members of the government, the elected government, have talked about conspiracies, right? And plots and plans. They've talked about ammunition, grenades, explosive devices, rocket launchers. The stories this morning talked about the fact that there were going to be, blowing up of police stations. Are you all aware that people who operate quarries have access to explosives? The public aware of that? If you are operating a quarry, whether legitimately or illegitimately, if you are a quarry operator, you tend to have access to explosives because you have to use dynamite to blow up the rock, right? To be able to get the aggregate. Those explosives tend to be housed in bunkers. If you are illegally acquiring guns and ammunition, there are caches in all different parts of the country, in forests and stuff. And there are people who could tell you which part of the forest there are stores of ammunition because they see when people go in to check up on their bunkers. This entire week, you all hear anything about the police doing forays into forested areas to find guns and ammo? Anything at all like that? Have you heard anything about the police going to look at or check up on the bunkers of any quarry operators in Trinidad and Tobago to see whether or not the quarry operators can account for all of the explosives that are allocated to them? Anything like that? Because they jamming we with information and wild headlines all week long, like if we in a Marvel Comics movie, right? So the headlines and the action, wild, over the top, the kind of thing to be like, ooh, but behind all of it, it's not making sense. And the investigation not making sense to me at all. I am not hearing about any proper policing. I am not hearing about evidence gathering. I hear about a state of emergency. I hear about all kind of wild reasons for the state of emergency. But I ain't hear any solid, this is how we going about things. Because if you're coming to tell me it involves prisoners, well, you go hold the prisoners and you go interview the prisoners. Good. And you've held prisoners, you move them to somewhere else. And I want to assume that you're taking the time to interview the prisoners. If you say the information has pointed to prisons officers being a part of the conspiracy, I want to assume you're going to hold prisons officers, detain them, and start to question them. If you're saying to me that you are aware that there was a whole plot to assassinate this one, that one, the other, and blow up this, that, and the other, I would assume that you would then start to check and track all of the areas where this kind of ammunition can be stored. You grasp? You can't just put ammunition like that anywhere. You can't. If you're having a plot like that, if you have decided this is what we're going to do, then you have to carefully store that kind of ammunition. If, as this stories in the papers say, is large amounts of ammunition. Large amounts of ammunition have to be carefully stored somewhere. Whether it is legitimately stored in bunkers that might be owned, or sorry, not used by the by a quarrying company, or if it's in unofficial bunkers in forested areas. No searches like that? None whatsoever? So you're coming to tell me that on Monday the 20th of July, you are going to stand up in the Parliament and tell the country that you plan to extend a state of emergency for however long, I guess 3 months again. If you extend it for 3 months again, what, pray tell, are you planning to do in those 3 months that you haven't attempted to do in the first 10 days? Because if by now you haven't held the prisons officers that you claim are part of the conspiracy, what is stopping them men, if they are involved in a conspiracy, from taking leave and jumping out and disappearing for a while? What's preventing them? If by now you haven't held a prisons officer for questioning on this, what has prevented them from covering their tracks in the last 10 days? If by now you haven't held any of the persons outside of the prisons that you are saying are a part of this conspiracy, when are you going to hold them? How are you going to hold them? What evidence will you have when you hold them? Are you reliant on holding people and beating a confession out of them? Is that the level of policing Mr. Marvel Comics coming with? Or is this state of emergency really being done to protect senior government officials? Has the government moved high-risk prisoners to secret locations because the government at risk? And here's why I'm going to ask that. Here's why I'm asking that question. A couple weeks ago, I heard a real interesting story. This guy, y'all see him smiling, suited up. That guy, on or around the 27th of March, would have resigned, tendered his resignation as an officer in the TTPS, right? Then we would have had, because he ran as a candidate for Tunapuna, then we would have had, on the 28th of April, we would have had a general election. So that is 27th of March. 27th of March, he resigns. 28th of April, general elections. So a month before the general elections, he would have resigned and jumped into the race. Xander, question for you. Did you visit a high-risk inmate at the maximum security prison 2 weeks before the general election? Did you? Because my information reliable information. Because you know me, I wouldn't talk this kind of thing without getting reliable information. So Xander is the man in the van. Golden Ann, take it to Fran, who'll take it to Dan, in the tan van. Did you visit a high-risk prisoner at the maximum security prison 2 weeks before the general election? That's the first question. What did you guys discuss 2 weeks before a general election? Third question, is that prisoner one of the prisoners held by this sitting government in a secure location right now because of the possibility of destabilizing the government, right? The plot to destabilize the government. So let me go over those questions. 1, did you visit a high-risk prisoner at the maximum security prison? 2, what did you discuss if you did meet that person 2 weeks before the general elections at the maximum security prison? 3, did that prisoner, if you met that prisoner at the maximum security prison 2 weeks before the general election, is that prisoner now also one of the prisoners who has been held, detained, moved by this government to a secure location because of the possibilities of a plot to destabilize the government? And I ask those questions because I don't think that the state of emergency has anything to do with us, as in the general public. I think the state of emergency has a lot to do with sitting officials in Kamala's government. This guy, whoops, right, this guy, and this guy, and other people in the government. But I think they know more than they are telling us. And I also think that we have been played for fools since the day the state of emergency was called to now. And I think that all of these big headlines about a plot to overthrow the country and destabilize the entire country, I think the plot is to destabilize key people in high offices. That's what I think. And that is based on the fact that the investigation into this plot has been piss poor, if there is an investigation at all. And key people linked to this thing are far too interconnected and saying very weird things. So that's how I'm going to wrap things up. Hopefully you guys enjoy a pre-recorded show, and we're going to try and have a proper live show soon because I know you all miss the interaction. So take it easy. We should tune in. We should all make an effort to tune in to the debate on Monday that intends to extend the state of emergency. It'll be interesting to hear what the government comes with by way of explanation for the extension of the state of emergency. You all enjoy. Take care.